And welcome back to the conversation, the DMGB conversation, which stands for It Doesn't Matter, Get Better. And as always, I have a wonderful guest with me today, a dear, dear friend of mine that goes all the way back to my Florida State coaching days, Erik Korem, who is a master of all trades. I mean, he is unbelievably smart, far smarter than me. But he was the high performance coach at Florida State when we were together. And we're going to talk about his journey as we go through it. But he understands the power of the mind, the power of the body, and how to leverage those things to really become successful. So excited to welcome Erik to the show. Erik, welcome to the conversation.
Man, thanks for having me on the DMGB. I love it, man. I love it. I love it.
So, and I usually pay homage to where I got that from, but when I was at Lafayette College as a special teams coordinator and recruiting coordinator, Pat Myers came in as as a lacrosse coach, and he built his entire culture around the DMGB mentality. So that's really where I picked it up, and I loved it as soon as I heard it. And then Pat and I kind of hit it off, and we had a bunch of great conversations about that. But excited to welcome you. I love Erik to death. Erik and I go through a spiritual journey together. We've been to FCA camps together. His dad is a man that I love to death, Dan Korem, who wrote a book that is called The Art of Profiling, and it goes into people's mindsets and how to identify behaviors and how they make decisions, and just a very, very smart family that I hold near and dear. So Erik, kind of give us your story, where you started, walk on at Texas A&M, prior to that, and your career through coaching, college coaching, NFL coaching, strength and conditioning, all the way to high performance and everything that you've learned in between.
Oh my gosh. So I don't know
if you have time for all that, actually.
I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Do people read that anymore? I don't even know.
I don't think so.
But yeah, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Family of 5. We were an entrepreneurial family. My parents worked so hard. Really, grew up. We weren't, poor, but we were definitely middle class, and there were times there that it was really hard to make ends meet. My mom started a catering company out of a 400 square foot kitchen, and now it's a multi-million-dollar catering and food manufacturing company. She was a registered nurse that had no business experience. My dad developed a publishing company. My sister has one of the largest organic cooking blogs in the world. She has, I think her monthly reach is 500,000 people. She helps people with thyroid and Hashimoto's disease. And my brother's an acclaimed and award-winning director and producer. The movie Dealt won South by Southwest and a bunch of other stuff. And so I come from a family of like overachievers. So I went to Texas A&M. I was a walk-on football player, and I was a pre-med major, and I was really fascinated. Well, like, first of all, you can see the difference between you and everybody else, right? 9 guys get drafted in my class. Multiple of those guys went on to win Super Bowls, and so it was very apparent from the very beginning, like the difference. And I was like, I got to do whatever it takes to get better. So I went into the world of strength conditioning because there was a science behind it. Went to the University of Arkansas, got a master's degree there, and that's when I got introduced to some of the best track and field athletes in the world. And for 15 years, I traveled the world, coached Veronica Campbell-Brown. She's one of 2 women to ever win the 200-meter gold. Coached Tyson Gay, U.S. 100-meter champion record holder. Coached some amazing athletes, multiple Olympic champions. And I got to start going around the world and seeing that people were doing things in a different way than we were. Things were synchronized better. It wasn't like the coaches are over here and the strength coaches are here. And if you think about it, the word high performance really comes from business. In 1982, it started getting socialized for business practice, and Toyota's model actually came out of it. And basically what you're doing is you're taking all these different domains and you're synchronizing them. So it started being used in sports internationally, especially in Australia, because they were terrible in the Olympic competition. I mean, in the 70s, there was one, I think it was the Montreal games. They won like 4 medals. It was just embarrassing. So they're like, all right, we got to do something different. So they initiated this high performance program in 1988. And then they knew that they were going to get the Sydney games. And by the time the Sydney Games came, they were ranked in the top 3 in medal count in the world, in a continent where there's very little population. So what were they doing? They were leveraging everybody's skill set. They were applying best practices in science. And so fast forward, I'm at Florida State with you, and I was the speed development coach and nutrition coordinator. And then Jimbo Fisher asked me to be the director of football operations. I was like, we don't need to get into all that, but I was like, all right, I'm going to do whatever you say. But I was like, hey, coach, can you also call me the director of sports science? He's like, yeah, you can call yourself whatever you want. I don't care.
Just make sure the plane's here on time. Just make sure the plane's here on time.
Yeah, don't leave anybody. That almost happened once. But it gave me the opportunity to go to Australia. So I went to Australia and I wanted to learn about high performance, and I brought back this technology called athlete tracking. So I spent almost a month there with a good friend of mine, Joe Danos, my wife. And we had a blast, and it was an information exchange. We were helping a new franchise startup Australian rules football team with some stuff, and they were exchanging information with us. So we come back, and I'm like, Coach Fisher, I want to strap these little boxes onto the back of our athletes and quantify the game of football, because nobody really knew what the game was. And I saw our limiting factor at the time not being talent, but being the fact that we were just crushing them in practice.
Soft tissue injuries. We had an extraordinary amount of soft tissue injuries. And for those of you that aren't familiar with what those things are, hamstrings, just galore. Everybody was pulling hamstrings every week.
So first season, we won 10 games. Look, we had smart coaches. We had talent. We had an amazing group. First year, we won 10 games. The second year, coach says, all right, I'll let you do this. So the Catapult company literally sends somebody. The guy's like sleeping on my couch. We put 12 of these things on our athletes. I hire a former propulsion engineer from NASA that's sitting in a closet.
That's right.
And I learned a very valuable lesson. First time we had a practice, Coach Fisher's like, I want to see your report. So I bring him this report, and he's like, well, was today hard? I was like, I think so. And then he just like ripped into me.
Yep.
Why? Because I just gave him a sheet of numbers that meant nothing to him. It was data, but not insight. And I want people to remember that in the business world. And if you work in analytics or whatever, or work for the customer, you have to take data and convert it to insight.
Correct.
Forward to the end of that second season, we underachieved significantly. We lost to Wake Forest. It was bad. Humiliating. And we were broken. We were a broken team. So at the end of the year, coach is like, all right, Eric, tell me what you found. And I did this presentation for the staff, and people were like holding their breath.
Which we did that on a daily basis anyway.
Yeah. But I was like, we practiced too much. I was like, we had this receiver. The coach would just like Rodney Smith. Remember him?
Oh.
He would just crush him all the time because he was always like running 9 routes.
And let's make it clear to everybody in the audience, Rodney was an NFL talent. Rodney went on to play in the NFL, is playing in the Canadian League, a very talented wide receiver that we ran into the ground on a daily basis.
So I go to coach, and I'm like, Coach, during training camp, Rodney literally ran over 50 miles. He's like, what? I was like, I called the cross-country coach, and he ran more than the entire cross-country team did in the month of August. And he was like, here's the thing, it's not his fault because nobody had quantified it before.
Nobody had ever looked at that before.
No. And I'm like, Coach, we're also doing like 3 or 4 games before we get to Saturday. So, and then we needed to change some stuff on the strength conditioning page. And to Coach Fisher's credit, you got to think about this. He's got his first major, it's one of the best programs in the country.
Yep.
He's like, am I really going to do this? And he did. And we had some, rough patches in there, but into that third season, we reduced our injury rate by 88%, and we won the championship with the same exact roster as the year before. Not one person changed on the starting lineup. That's crazy. So it was a compilation of a lot of things.
Yep.
But there is no doubt that was a
It's a huge factor.
Yes.
We were faster, we were stronger, we were fresher. Our game day explosiveness and ability to compete went way up, right? So performance increased, which we were talented. Kudos to that entire staff and everybody that was there, because we recruited really well. We brought in very good talent, but that talent was performing way higher than they were the year before.
And I think in any business, it's all about taking the people around you and elevating them.
Preach.
Yeah.
Because that is what we do it On the Ball now, is we walk into companies and we say, hey, how can we make your people better, right? Let's evaluate who they are, what they do, and figure out ways to elevate them. So it's the same thing. It's just in a different industry.
Right. So I went on to become the high performance director at Kentucky, and I want to unpack this word for you for a second. High performance, like if you go on Instagram and Twitter and, people are like, I'm a high performance coach, and it's just like motivation.
Yes,
here's a calendar to follow. That is not high performance. High performance is a problem solving capability. You do this, you take any problem, you break it down into its constituent parts. You look at the limiting factors for those different areas, and then you synchronize all your efforts for one purpose: to win. It's a problem-solving capability. So you can take high-performance principles and you can use them in sports, you can use them in business, you can use them in your personal life to become the best version of yourself or to elevate your company.
I love that.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm doing now is so long story short, I went to University of Kentucky, set up the infrastructure that led to the best 6-year run in school history. Went to the Houston Texans, was the director of sports science there. And then I'll be honest, Nudes, here's what happened, man. One day I'm making $300,000 a year. Things are going great. New GM comes in, and he just lops off almost everybody's head. And I literally get a text, Eric, I want to see, because I met with him the previous week at like 6:30 in the morning. That's just football. It's dumb.
Yep.
Like, hey, I want to talk to you tomorrow about this, this, and this. I'm like, sure. I go into his office, and then I have this folder. I was going to go over some stuff. And then he's like, this was a really hard decision. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a second, I'm about to get fired. I had this folder of all this really good information to give him, and I just closed the folder.
Yep.
And I was out. And I walked out, and there was the next person coming in. They had no clue. And it was it was a year of firing. Ironically, that GM was let go 17 months later.
Wow.
So I end up at William & Mary as the director of high performance. So I oversee the physical, psychological, technical, tactical, intellectual development of the athletes, the health, well-being of the performance of the student athletes. But I got into this program called the Presidential Leadership Scholars. I was defending – I'm a psychopath. When I was at Kentucky, I decided to get a PhD. I saw the future of this. And I'm like, if I'm going to do this job, I'm going to need to have a terminal degree.
Right.
So I got a degree in like how sleep affects the brain and the body's ability to adapt to stress. Now, don't you think that's helpful for anybody?
For everybody. And you had started talking about that way back at Florida State. You weren't in a PhD program for it yet, but we were talking about how to introduce melatonin to help people sleep better, and the importance of getting a certain number of hours of sleep in order to recover faster, not for the next day, but for 3-4 days down the line. So, I mean, you soaked it all up.
You soaked it all up, buddy. I love this.
Dude, there's no doubt. And I mean, that was the one thing. So to talk a little bit about my career path, where I went from what we were doing at Florida State, we were recruiting at an unbelievable level. We were doing things in performance with what you were doing and how we were evolving the game at just an unbelievable rate. And everywhere I went after that, it wasn't even close. It was so hard for me to swallow sitting in other people's staff rooms and hearing what we were going to do, aside from Brian Polian. Brian Polian, what he did with the resources we had at the University of Nevada was unbelievable. I mean, we introduced the sleep skins there. We had the kids wearing them on the planes to reduce swelling and to increase blood flow. Like, he was finding every nickel and dime. We were working on the Chip Kelly system, you know, the Fast Fridays, the No Sweat Thursdays, and stuff like that in order to kind of balance out the workload. We couldn't afford Catapult, so we weren't using that system, but we knew that that's where we wanted to be and try to do it. So, I mean, what we did at the start of my career, I ate all of that up so much and then never found it again, and would never, you know, obviously I was never in the role that I could get head coaches to understand that this was a place that we should be going and it could help us, which, you know, 10 years after my coaching, or through coaching, here I am as an entrepreneur now and trying to get business people to understand those core principles.
You know, here's something really interesting, buddy. Credit needs to go to Coach Fisher for doing this. But the other thing is one of the things that frustrates me about sports is you could be the smartest guy in the room and you may not get listened to because of rank.
Yep.
Look at the best startups in the world. You know, young Mark Zuckerberg. If he was in football, they'd have been like, shut up and go to the corner.
Correct.
I mean, it's serious. Right. It's ludicrous. It is not, it is
it's backwards. It's just
way backwards. And when you're an entrepreneur, winning is defined by serving people to a very high degree. And then, are you making money?
Right.
And so I'll be honest, there's a false economy in sports because these people get paid exorbitant amounts of money where
they're not necessarily qualified to do their job.
No. No, it's true. And in business, you'll get found out real fast.
Correct.
And so
let's stay on this. Let's continue to go down that journey of sharing with our audience the things that we've learned, right? Now, I specifically want to serve it to you because now you're kind of in the same world of where you're trying to help people and what you're going to do. But how have you transitioned your thought process to be able to help more than just athletes?
Yeah, I wanted to just share this with you about the presidential scholars because this is what happened.
Yep.
So, presidential leadership scholars. I was finishing my PhD. A really good friend of mine, his name is David Dixon. He's a Marine Cobra pilot. He is like G.I. Joe. I've known him for 20 years. He got his master's at Stanford. He got his MBA at Stanford, got a master's at Harvard. And I always told him, like, you look like the prototypical Marine. He sent me a picture of him in Times Square. It was his face for the cover of the Marines. I'm like, I told you. Right. He called me. He's like, you got to get in this program, Erik. I'm like, I looked it up. It's like there's no way I'm getting in. The presidential foundations of President Bush, 41, 43, the Clintons, and the LBJ Foundation pick 60 scholars a year. And you have to have an initiative that can help the world or America. And they bring the most diverse cohort of people together, and they literally train you for 7 months. I got literally one-to-one with our group with the president, his former administration. They're bringing in CEOs of Fortune 100 companies. It was like you couldn't put a price tag on this thing. And as I'm sitting in this room, I'm like, I am meant for so much more. And my talent, skills, and abilities, I'm not helping enough people. I'm just not. My reach isn't big enough.
Right.
And so that's one of the things they teach you is like, how do you scale your ability to help as many people as you possibly can? And so I had a business idea, and I can't go into a lot of it right now, but it's moving forward really quickly. But I started thinking, like, what's one of the ways that I could help people? I need to reach out on social media. I need to share what I know in a way that can reach a very broad audience. And social media is so powerful. And when COVID hit, our whole world went virtual. And so you have a captive audience ready and willing to listen. And so I started studying like the best creatives in the world, like the Chris Do, check them out on Instagram, Jonda, people that like create amazing content and tell stories. So I started doing that with my Instagram, teaching high performance principles and really starting to translate it to anybody in the world. So like, how do you prevent burnout? How do you be a high performer in your brain? Like the high performance skills that you need to be successful.
Yeah.
I actually put out a post on job addiction, and this went bananas. There's a guy named Nassim Taleb. I highly recommend that everybody read his stuff. So have you ever heard of something called a black swan event?
No, I mean, I've heard it, but I don't know what it means.
2008 collapse was a black swan event. Nobody could see that the mortgage-backed securities were going to fail. COVID, like boom, like this, right? So he has this idea of being anti-fragile. Okay, so something that's fragile is like an egg. You drop a brick on it, it breaks.
Right.
If you something that's robust doesn't break under pressure. So a rock is robust, but the human body is anti-fragile, meaning if you apply stress to it at the appropriate dose with the appropriate rest, guess what? It gets better.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of us are not anti-fragile. Look at our lives. The 3 biggest addictions in the world: heroin, carbohydrates, and a monthly income. Most of us are addicted to our jobs, and we are lying to ourselves and believing that our employer is going to take care of us, that everything's going to be okay, that hard work alone gets you to the top. And guess what happens? When COVID happens, when whatever, the bottom falls out, you have nothing, another source of income to help you. So I put this out there. I couldn't answer all the responses. I mean, it was just like, and then I put out this thing called the side hustle checklist, like when you know you need a side hustle.
Yep.
And how do I apply high performance principles now? Because that's the problem. People are scared. They want an extra income. And you are teaching people how to do this in one way through LinkedIn.
I want to get your thought process on this, because we come from a world of athletics where there's no clock. The only clock that exists is on game day. Every other time of day, there's no clock. You're working at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're working at 9 o'clock at night. Maybe you have a break here in the middle of the day, but it isn't a constantly consuming event, which is the exact opposite of most business structures, especially if you get involved in a corporation. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, that's different. You're taking responsibility for your income and you're doing it. But when you get involved in a corporation, most people work from 9 to 5. And they think that's the time that I'm supposed to work. I do what I can with those hours, and then I turn it off after that. And you put out a post the other day, which I love, that talked about the idea of balancing everything at one time is impossible. Life is seasonal. There's a season for grinding in business. There's a season for taking your time with your family. Everything moves and ebbs and flows, and you should do that. And I talked about this on our morning huddle the other day. There's a difference between inspiration and motivation. I think it's the same thing. Motivation happens quick. You feel it, but then it's gone forever after 15 minutes, 30 minutes, a day, whatever it is. Inspiration is something that's internal, that even though it's not always at the peak level of making you feel so inspired, when you have inspiration, it's always there. It might be lower at some points, and you might have to work harder to accomplish what you want to do, but you always feel it, and it's always pushing you, as opposed to motivation, which is pulling you to do something.
Yes. So what can I answer here?
So to me,
you just preached, my man.
How do we get people in the business world that are used to working in 9 to 5, and they have this very scoped vision of, well, this is what I do and when I do it, to saying, no. Take the barriers off of it and allow yourself to work like this instead of like this.
They have to have a reason that's so compelling that they have no other option.
I love it.
They have to have a reason that's so compelling that they have no other option. So when I lost my job, if you're in the NFL or if you're in college sports, you either have been fired or you're on your way to getting fired. And people that have been in that world have just a different perspective on things. It's not like in the 60s where you were awarded for punching the clock and you were there for, and you got the 20-year gold watch. And no, sports, like every day you are proving that I deserve this job. And so I have 3 kids now, and I have a wife, and we were living in Texas, and that's where I'm from. I'd I don't know, 13 or 14 years since I lived back in Texas. And now I'm with my family and everything's great. And then the carpet gets pulled out from underneath me and I was not prepared. Now I have a compelling reason that like I can't run away from.
Right.
And now I was making a third of what I was making before with 3 kids and in Williamsburg, which is incredibly expensive. So what am I going to do? I got to have a side hustle.
Right.
I got to start generating revenue. And so I started doing that. I created a company called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Prep. I ramped up my consulting arm and I'm doing projects as a subcontractor for the Department of Defense. I started building these things.
Like we've talked a lot about your sports background. Like what are you doing right now? Give me your 4, 5, 6, 7, however many lanes you're in right now, because that's unbelievable. I mean, you're doing subcontractor work for the Defense Department. That's unbelievable. You came from a football background and look at what you're doing and how you're helping people.
Well, that was a God thing. Like this guy emailed me from Tallahassee, Florida, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to help out with this." I'm like, I thought he was a gym. I'm like, I don't want to get involved in a gym. Long story short, they have a data enterprise architecture that services the military. And they're like, we could use your expertise in helping with these human performance units within like special operations. So I started going around, and I'm not saying anything classified, but I was helping going to a SEAL group and going to a Ranger regiment and special forces group and helping them do the things that I do with their units. And then a year ago on our 10th anniversary, my wife and I were in California, and I was like, we both do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it 2 years. She's been doing it a little over 3 years. And we just fell in love with it. And we're like, she's a doctor of physical therapy. I have a PhD, high performance coach. And we're like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is one of the most fastest growing sports in the world. MMA has blown it up because BJJ is the ground part of MMA. I'm like, the number one thing holding people back in BJJ is injuries. So I found a pain point. And then I started looking and I was like, nobody's serving this market. I mean, there are a few people, but not a lot. So we started this company, BJJ Prep. We got people in like 3 continents now doing we have a performance app that they can buy. It's like $14.99 a month. I got an email from a 14-time IBJJF champion in Spain saying that like our programs have basically like given him new life. And so like that was like one vertical. I really developed that for my wife so that she had the option of just staying at home. So you got that. And then I've started doing, my sister has this huge audience of people with thyroid and Hashimoto's disease. And I was like, hey, listen, I have an app delivery system now where we can have, it's a very niche market. Nobody had served them yet with exercise. Cause I mean, you can crush these people if you don't know what you're doing. So I did the scientific research, created a product. We tested it and converted 70%.
Wow.
70% conversion. So now we're rolling this out to 120,000 people in August.
That's amazing.
And
exercises specifically for those conditions that will help them.
Yes. I don't want to go into the details of it, but that is a debilitating issue. If anybody has thyroid disease or Hashimoto's issues, like you have
Gabby has Hashimoto's.
Huh? My
girlfriend Gabby has Hashimoto's.
Yeah. So my sister actually helps people get out of that. And she actually had Hashimoto's.
Me, I'm going to use this now.
Yeah, totally flipped it for her. And she has an audience. Her email list is over 120,000 people. Wow. And she's been serving people. And so like we were talking like this is the next step. And so really what it is this, like for anybody else, I just put out a post today. You have to read it. It's called Competition is for Losers. It's Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is the founder of PayPal and Planetar. Elon Musk and him helped start PayPal together. You need to find a market where you can have a monopoly. And people get scared because they're like, I don't want to go into this oversaturated market because everybody's there and I'm never going to find a customer. There's this concept called the red ocean and the blue ocean. Okay. The red ocean is where the competition is. There's sharks swimming in the water. You're competing against everybody else. And it's like, The blue ocean is where there's like an untapped audience. So let me give you an example. Don't go teach LinkedIn for everybody in the world. Why don't you go? I'm just saying, like somebody like wants to teach LinkedIn.
Right.
Teach LinkedIn for lawyers.
Right.
People in fitness industry. Oh, I can't write fitness programs. Go be the fitness expert for single moms in a rural area that can only work out at home. How many hundreds of thousands of people are there like that? But people don't think like that. They just think, I got to go capture. No, you go create an audience. Go serve the heck out of that audience. And then guess what? They will tell you what they want.
I love that. Oh, my God. Full of nuggets. Full of nuggets. And I can see how your brain has really just expanded and evolved and where your main focus is right now and what you're doing. I mean, you and I have talked about what you're venturing out to, and I'm super, super excited for you. I love the way your family has grown. I love you guys to death, and I can't wait for us to have an opportunity to get together, seeing as how neither one of us are controlled by a football schedule anymore.
No, well, I mean, I'm still at William and Mary, but it's a totally different thing. And I'm very blessed by that. But yeah, man, like problem solving is how is Elon Musk putting people like this is my favorite one, dude. When people will come to you and they're like, in football, they're like, no, that can't be done. Nah, you can't do that. If you would have told people 10 years ago that NASA would be flying on private space shuttles and that those rockets would be landing themselves back down on a pod,
no
people
chance.
would be like, no. Yes. The guy's doing he's a genius.
Yeah.
But my point is like we need to take the lid off. And
I love this because we talk about this too. And I think there is a blend here. I think if you're Elon Musk and you can recognize how to do something that nobody else is doing, that's amazing. You can figure out how to land a rocket, amazing, right? I would never be able, maybe I could if I applied myself to learning those things to how to land a rocket, but that's not my lane, right? My talent and who I am, I'm a great communicator, right? I'm a great teacher. I come from a heritage of salespeople and understanding how to develop relationships. That is what has been the thing that has been underlying in all of my success my entire life, is that I build quality relationships with everybody that I meet in my life. So I have now turned that and said, okay, that's the foundation of who I am. How do I now take everything that I've learned in my life through the disciplines of coaching, through being raised by an entrepreneur and being unbelievable at building relationships, to go help people do that exact thing in their line of business? Industry agnostic, right? I think even if you have a transactional business, if you teach people how to build relationships within that transaction, you can grow that business immediately.
I've heard it said this before. I think it was Russell Brunson that when you have an audience, you need to keep selling that audience. They will keep buying from you until you stop selling to them or you turn into a jerk. So if you provide them with a great buying where you provide them amazing value and they're like, yes, I'm giving you my money, and then they get something that's worthwhile and you have a relationship there, they will keep buying from you until you either stop offering them or you turn into a jerk. And what you're saying, relationships is the key.
The core principles to that, I think, are trust and value, right? In order to build a relationship with somebody, they have to trust you. In order to trust somebody, you have to know them. And so what you're talking about is sharing everything that you know on social media. It's an unbelievable way to introduce yourself to people all over the world just to get them to know you, right? Like, yes, you're feeding unbelievable high performance knowledge that's great for everybody, but you're also sharing who you are, where you came from, what you're about, so people can make a decision on whether or not they like you. They're going to find a reason to buy from you at that point. Then it's about, well, how can I deliver value? What value do I have that I'm able to give to you? And then that creates the transaction.
And that's what you just hit something on the head there, Mark. You can't just use social media to sell. You've also got to be very strategic. about how you share your life with people, because the know, like, and trust factor.
There it is.
If they know, like, and trust you.
We're stopping here because I try not to keep this more than 30 minutes, and we're already at 35.
Okay.
And you and I probably go for an hour and a half.
Okay. Let's do it again. Let's do it again.
End it with these two fundamentals, right? Okay. It's all about people knowing, liking, and trusting you 100%. And then it's also, let's unpack that high performance again, which it's about identifying the problem, right? And then unpacking that problem into each of the, I want you to say it again. Say it exactly how you said it.
You have to understand the problem. You break it down into its constituent parts. You identify the limiting factors, and then you put it back together in a synchronized way to win.
I love it. I love it. This was an unbelievable episode. Thank you so much for being with me today. Congrats to you and everything that's happening with you and your family. I love you to death, and I can't wait to see you.
Likewise, buddy.
Thank you, Erik.